The following is rated not safe for work. It contains strong language, adult situations, and lots of spoilers. Discretion is advised.
In the criminal justice system, cinematic-based offenses are considered especially heinous. The dedicated attorneys who investigate these villainous films are members of an elite squad known as the Reels of Justice. These are their stories.
Order, please, order. The Reels of Justice now in session. Judge Big Ben Haslar presiding. Your eyes for the Honorable Judge Haslar. Be seated. Welcome to the Reels of Justice. Today we're in the case of Spectre versus No Time to Die. 2015's Spectre is the 24th film in the James Bond series and follows Agent 007 as he unmasks the leader of a secret organization behind all the recent tragedies in his life. 2021's No Time to Die is the 25th film in the James Bond series and sees 007 come out of retirement to rekindle an old fame from with a deadly past. For those of you unfamiliar with our court proceedings, in civil cases like this, a counsel is appointed to each film to represent their case as to why their client is the superior movie. And ultimately, the jury will render its verdict as to which is the better film. The decision will hereby be standing in all rankings and listicles from here on until the end of time ad infinitum. Jeremy Black, you are representing Spectre. You may begin your opening statement.
Fine, thank you very much. I'm in the happy position of being able to compare two films. I am not going to say that my film, Spectre, is the best film that ever was produced, nor am I going to say it's the best of the Bond films. I'm going to take a different approach. I'm going to say that neither of the films we're looking at are great films or great Bond films, that my one is less bad than the other one. And that is the approach I am going to take.
That sounds like a wise one to me. Mr. Rob Maynard, you are representing No Time to Die. You may present your opening statement.
Hello? Yes. Hello. This is Agent 007 James Bond calling. Yes. Good morning. I'm calling to see if I can make an appointment this afternoon to die. Yes. Do you have something open around 3:30? No, nothing at 3:30. I see. What about 1 o'clock? No, not 1 o'clock either. What times do you have available this afternoon to die? No times. No times this afternoon. You're booked completely solid. Okay, well, you could have said that to begin with. Yes, it does seem like everyone's thought to die at the same time, doesn't it? Yeah, well, yeah, it's that time of year, holiday rush and all, I understand. What about tomorrow? No, that never dies, huh? Okay. Well, do you have any time next week? Tuesday morning, 10 a.m. Let me see. No, damn, I'm rappelling into a volcanic lair at 9:30. I'll never make it. I could probably do 11. No time then either. Okay, well, looks like I'll have to die another day then. Let me see what I have on the calendar next month and call you back, okay? Huh? What's that? You just had a last-minute cancellation and can squeeze me in to die immediately? Yeah, that's great. Of course, I'll be right down right away.
No.
Thank you. Goodbye.
I'm taking that
Bob
appointment
Newhart,
from you.
ladies and gentlemen. Bob Newhart.
I wanted to die during that opening
Speaking of King
statement, and
Kong.
I'm stealing it. But thank you very much. Mr. Jeremy Black, you may present your first exhibit on behalf of Spectre.
Right, thank you very much. Well, let me first build on what I was just saying. Neither of them are great films. They're both sprawling. They're too long. The plots are somewhat incoherent. That's being polite. The strength of the opener for Spectre is not sustained all the way through. There's no doubt about that. Wow. What I am going to argue is that Spectre is the better film. I'm going to say partly because it's less bad, and linked to that, it's less long. It's 148 minutes. The other one, you have 15 minutes more of misery. Secondly,
What a breeze.
yeah. Secondly, it has a tighter start. in the sense it has one pre-credits adventure, which is the very strong one on the Day of the Dead in Mexico City, which I happen to think is really excellent, apart from the very last shot of him sort of getting the helicopter to sort of fly properly and a sort of idyllic look on his face. That's a bit ridiculous. But in contrast with that, the other one, No Time to Die, has two long pre-credits adventures, of which the one in Italy is pretty good, but the other one is rubbish, incoherent, doesn't add very much, and you do wonder what the hell is going on. So the other thing I'm going
I'd like to rebut to that point.
Yes, please.
The opening of Spectre is stronger than the opening to No Time to Die. I will agree with that. The Day of the Dead scene is technically impressive, although I'd have to ask why we would keep one long shot on Bond other than to show that we just can. Like, other than it being technically impressive, it doesn't add much to the story. But while the scene, the pre-credit in No Time to Die is long, it's all coherently tied together. We're shown Madeline's past, which we need to know later, and we're shown why Bond splits up. Both those things have to be shown to us before the song, because the song is thematically about Bond's feeling of betrayal. The song has to wait until Bond's been betrayed. So those sequences, while they're long, they are important to lay out before the song, because the song is so thematically linked to what happens.
Would you have a rebuttal to the case or the point of the script being tighter in Spectre versus No Time to Die, which goes on for 57 minutes longer?
Is it really 57 minutes longer?
I don't know.
It's 15. You said 15. 15, the problem is they both feel exactly as long to me. And when you tell me one's 15 minutes, I go, oh, well, then that must have paced on a little jauntier, because they both felt too long. I agree. They're both too long. And I would chop off pretty much the last little bits that happen at the end of No Time to Die after Bond's exploded. Spoilers, Bond dies at the end of this
what?
one. Yep. Well, see, they got the title all wrong here. Yeah, you see?
Actually, the movie's so long, I'm still watching it for the case. So stretch this out.
See, the title is Time to Die.
Oh,
I just noticed that
I
Jesus
got
made it.
I got it. All right.
You're too clever. This is a podcast. I was going to see that.
I know, but you'll feel it. What I want to counter is how strong Spectre begins with how weak it ends. That MI6 saw running through the hallway scene. Who set that up? Are you going to tell me Ernst Stavro Blofeld walked around MI6 crumbling and painting arrows on walls? This way, Bond, wringing his hands. It's so stupid. Now compare it to the really excellent Poison Garden final sequence that you get in No Time to Die. That is a great backdrop. The kick-ass fight Bond has going up the tower to get the blast doors is probably the strongest sequence between either film. All the quick shots he does, the incendiary grenades, the fight with Primo at the top of the tower. It is a really great coordinated action sequence. And so it ends on a strong note, whereas Spectre does not.
All right, Mr. Black, please present your next exhibit.
Well, can I just reply to my colleague?
Absolutely.
Obviously everybody has their own personal responses. I've seen No Time to Die twice in the cinema, each time going with a different friend. And both times we've got completely and catatonically bored with the scene. That whole last thing, it's literally grey. It is grey. Incidentally, it's not original. This business of the Poison Garden, if you know your Fleming, you will know that is in the novel, You Only Live Twice. And incidentally, if you're interested in the novel and this business as to whether James Bond dies, you should know this. In the novel, the end of that novel, Bond does die in an exploding volcano. And of course, he comes back in the next novel, Man with the Golden Gun, novel, not film we're talking about here, having been missing for 1.5 years. Okay? So there are...
Did they explain that?
Well, I'm not. My job isn't to explain it. My job is to tell you that No Time to Die is totally incoherent, and it's got this naff series of fights at the end, which are very boring, and the villain who's very uninteresting. Now, several points to make about the Spectre, including that scene at the very end. The scene at the very end, of course, is him driving off in the sports car, and that is a constant theme in that particular film. Like it or dislike it, you can take different views upon it, which is that it makes reference repeatedly to the earlier films. So, for example, the struggle or the conflict between him and a helicopter makes reference to From Russia with Love. So does the fight in a train make reference, and the restaurant meal scene in a train make reference from Russia with Love. The emphasis on the car is very much going back to Goldfinger. And what I would
could I make a rebuttal here? The DB5 is also included in No Time to Die. And in the opening sequence in Italy, which you mentioned already liking, we get that great bulletproof window scene.
I agree with you.
And he gets Gatling gun headlights where he gets to do donuts. So the DB5, I'm just saying, I just want to pop in, actually gets to be shown off in No Time to Die.
Interrupt, otherwise it becomes whoever shouts loudest. The point I'm making is that there is a consistent trope in the Inspector of these references back. Now, that's just answering the previous point, and I'm not sure I would argue that it necessarily I don't think either film ends well. I don't think Spectre ends any worse than the other film. The other film is terrible at its ending. I don't think Spectre has a particularly brilliant ending, but I do think Spectre has a better beginning. And the argument that you need those very extensive scenes in order to make sense of the song is hilariously silly. Songs are just, I mean, that is just silly. And the idea that the film is supposed to be subservient to a plot sketched out in order to provide some coherence for a plotmeister, that again is silly. What I
would also like to make a rebuttal too, though. If you like prior references, No Time to Die makes repeated references to On Her Majesty's Secret Service.
The court acknowledges that all these Bond films are making repeated references to the previous Bond films.
Including using several theme songs from
do more so than others. And one of the things the critics commented about on Spectre is how it was suffused with such references and that it gave it a kind of elegiac feel to it. That was one of the comments that was made. And it was also linked to two ideas. It was believed it was going to be Craig's last film on the Bond sequence, and that therefore they were actually summarizing where they'd got to at that point. And also another point, you may or may not agree with this, but Mendes is simply a better director than Fukunaga. I mean, and as you will know, the incoherence of No Time to Die, with bringing in different directors and all the rest of it, at that level, there's always been problems with the Bond films, but at that level, there hadn't been a film in a Bond film that had been so incoherent since the first Casino Royale.
Mr. Maynard, is it more incoherent?
My time to, not at all. Nothing about Spectre makes any sense whatsoever. First off, it's an absurd proposition that the most powerful clandestine criminal group in the world basically sprung up out of bad blood between two sort of brothers, right? And so they retcon. You want to talk about, showing homage to the old film, showing homage to any of the novels, to retcon a character like Ernst Stavro Blofeld and make him Bond's shitty half-brother, adoptive brother, is so stupid and lame. One, it's a plot point plunked from the bottom of the barrel daytime soap opera. But the fact that the filmmakers needed to make a personal connection between Bond and the master of Spectre in order to create stakes for Bond to want to stop him is completely absurd. The fact that Blofeld's an evil genius is already enough of a reason for Bond to want to destroy him. This personal conflict, this personal connection never makes a conflict between the two characters in the movie, right? It's not like Bond is going to hesitate to destroy this guy. He absolutely hates him. So the fact that they have some past, it doesn't matter. And the problem is they retcon all the movies then that came before this series, right? They're now saying that all the movies prior, they were all agents of Spectre, even though we never see them wear any Spectre rings. Spectre's never mentioned. Silva in Skyfall is decidedly working on his own for revenge, but they still try to retcon it and say that he's a member of Spectre. And that's pretty stupid considering that Mendes, this great director, directed both movies. So he can't even get consistency between his own. So there's a jumbled mess in No Time to Die, and it's inherited from Spectre. They have to clean up Spectre's mess. And I like how they do it. They bring in another guy named Safin, and he kills all of Spectre, which is exactly what we want. This fake Blofeld, the Hannibal Lecter Blofeld, we get to watch him die because he's a terrible, terrible retcon. And it's the best thing Safin does in this whole movie, is to kill that dude and to kill all of these muddy, undefined Spectre characters.
Mr. Black, I would like to hear a rebuttal specifically on the ham-fisted sort of way they make Spectre like the cause of everything that happened in the James Bond films before this one.
Well, first of all, I think it's absolutely correct that that kind of element of the plot is, both of the plots of both of these films are stupid. I mean, extraordinarily stupid. As far as the Spectre one is concerned, they don't make it actually of all of the James Bond films. That's not true.
Mm-hmm. Just Craig's.
Of Craig's, yes.
But objection, would you not agree that Craig's novels are Craig's films are basically encapsulated? He doesn't meet Goldfinger in this, right? Because since they retconned this whole Blofeld thing, Blofeld's a whole different guy. He's his half brother. There was none of this that happened before Casino Royale. All of that's thrown away with Spectre.
Well, as I said, I'm not sure that I agree. I think that they only really refer to the Craig films in the plot sequence, and personally, I find that whole idea a bit silly. Of course, it's not original to Spectre. You will know that there is a link, very strong link, between the first two of the Craig films, which are supposed in plot terms to go directly on from one to the other, and you go from Mr. White to Mr. Green, so that there is actually a direct linkage there. And you could argue, if you wanted to, I don't particularly want to, because I think the later Bond films as a whole are not particularly marvelous. So I think, but the argument for both of these films is fairly specious. As I've said, I'm talking about the better of two weak films, and I've not heard anything that leads me to disagree with that approach. Because pointing out that there are flaws in Spectre doesn't, as it were, undermine the argument that Spectre is less bad. But if you want to defend them, you could argue that one of the ways in which they are looking at these films, and of course, it's a tendency in many as it were, linked films of the period, you see it in the Bourne Identity films, is to actually interleave them. Now, I personally don't like that, but that is a modern tendency, and it's one that one sees. What I would argue instead, as I've said, is that, first of all, it's very disjointed, No Time to Die. It is far too long for the pre-credits, and having both of them is poor. Of the actual film as a whole, the section I found best or most satisfying, possibly because I've been there, was the section shot in Santiago in Cuba. And I have the advantage of having been to where they were shooting that. Although actually, I'm not sure whether it is shot in Cuba, but where they're setting it, let's put it like that.
Was Ana de Armas there?
Yeah, I thought that was an interesting period of the film. But a lot of the film has longers, and also it's lacking in some of the bite that you associate with James Bond films. Take, for example, sex. In the Spectre, there's sex between Bond and two separate women. In No Time to Die, quite frankly, there's that really naff scene where the actress changes in the in Santiago. Just a pathetic scene. There's no real sexual energy, no real sexual bite. There's no real allure in that film. And I think that's
objection, if I could, to that. I would say that's quite intentional, right? We're looking at a Bond who is now absolutely jaded after all the Vesper Lynd stuff and after all the Madeline Swan stuff. Bond clearly just isn't going to love or give his heart out to anyone again, even briefly. Also, Ana de Armas is, I mean, she's really a kid. I mean, the age difference between Léa Seydoux and Craig is already pretty big, but she's really just a kid. So them just kind of being fun pals that he's sort of vaguely flirting with, that's enough for me. There's plenty of sex when he gets Madeline Swan back into his life. That's the woman he really loves, but he's clearly in a dry spell there where he's not doing any Bond stuff. He's not saving the world and he's not fucking women. So,
well, can I just say on that, you can take a film and say, well, this is inherently coherent. I mean, look, I'm 68. You could make a film of my life and set it on my various ailments, and you could say, oh, well, this gives you an account of what the character is really like. Actually, people don't go to see a James Bond film to see somebody who, as you put it, is dry. They go for some bite. And one of the things about Spectre is there is a genuine, and interestingly enough, the television version or the video version of Spectre is less sexy or less sexually explicit than the full film version, not least in the case of the first actress's underwear. But it's terrible, the things one has to notice as a film critic. But the point is that there is an energy there. There is a bite there. I mean, literally, in those cases, there is an energy in the relationship with Léa Seydoux which carries with it a sexual charge. Maybe the problem in the latter film is they haven't cast an adult woman, and there isn't actually somebody who therefore plays well against the Craig character. Can I add one other point? Because we're trying to move it forward.
Yes, please.
A lot of Spectre is poor. A lot of both films is poor. Other than the start, another section I thought was very, very good and quite sustained. It goes through 3 patches, really. Is the section set in Rome, the funeral and the relationship with the widow,
Monica Bellucci.
Yeah, followed by the meeting scene. Of the Spectre Council, followed by the chase. And not only is that very sustained, and I think it's beautifully shot, a lot of color palette, a lot of using dark and light counterpointed in all 3 of those sequences, but to differing effects. And I thought that was a truly triumphant part of the film. I would argue that the last section of the film doesn't match it. When it goes back to London, it becomes dreary. Now, out of my colleague's viewpoint, my colleague would doubtless say, oh, well, that's taking you to accuracy. London often is dreary. But I actually think we want something other than accuracy. Whereas I'm afraid to say a lot of No Time to Die, particularly the section at the end, but also the general sort of snow and forests, is very uninteresting visually and poorly shot visually, I'd say, other than some use of drone work.
I don't think any of the scenes in No Time to Die are especially shot poorly. I mean, you're right about the drained color palette, but it's clearly a sort of drab atmosphere. It's called the Poison Garden. Excuse it for not having flamingos hanging out. It's a dark, dreary place. So I think some of that color palette is intentional. Now, I agree. The first act of Spectre, hey, if we were putting the first act of Spectre on trial, no problem. That is a great first act. It is how acts 2 and 3 fail to follow up on what the first act sets up. It's when it introduces the brother concept of Stavro Blofeld, which is awful. It's when they misuse Batista as Hinks over and over. When he shows up and crushes the guy's eyes, he's a super badass hench. What's he do the rest of the movie? He sits in a car wearing a dumb hat, driving. He gets a 3-minute fight with Bond where he never even once tries to crush his eyes. He's going to try to throw him off a train, which is stupid. Even though, like, you crush eyes, Batista. Do the eye crush. He doesn't even try. He's going to throw him off a train instead. And by the way, he doesn't say shit before he gets pulled off either. Like, I've watched that about 6 times over and over loop. He goes, shoot, in some really dumb overdubbed way and gets sucked off. It's a terrible death. And you spend the rest of the time of the movie waiting for him to come back. Compare him to the hench in No Time to Die, who's a little bit more of a comic relief. You have Dr. Valdo Obrachev, the scientist who created Heracles, a great comic relief character. He's doing the Russian sort of over-the-top, super amoral thing. He's kind of a throwback to the Alan Cummings Boris from GoldenEye. You know, he's a baddie who doesn't do his fighting with his fists. He's capable of more worldwide levels of destruction with his intellect. You know, he's a dangerous dude despite being goofy. He's utterly amoral. Going back to Bond girls, I wanted to touch on, you know, Monica Bellucci in Spectre is lovely. She's very elegant. I like the MILF touch. You know, at 50 years old, she's the oldest woman to be cast as a Bond girl. Still younger than Bond was, though. But she can't compare to the unprecedented beauty of Ana de Armas. I mean, I love her character. She's this inexperienced newbie agent who only gets the gig because Felix Leiter is the greatest wingman in the history of cinema. It's a funny concept. Even in the world of espionage, it's got to be someone's first day. And despite what my colleague says, Craig and Ana de Armas have great chemistry. We see it in Knives Out. We see it here. It's not a sexual energy. It's a big brother, obnoxious little sister energy. Because again, Bond doesn't need to hook up with this woman that's 30 years younger than her. That's not going to fly very well in 2021. So they're just going to be kind of pals, and Bond's going to go back to the woman he's been obsessing with since the beginning of that movie. You know, that is the theme of the movie. He is torn up that he walked away from Swan and can't trust her anymore. And so, of course, he's not going around and randomly hooking up all the time. I'm sure he does okay still, but you know, he's going to be even more guarded.
Better than I will.
I don't know if Jeremy, if wants any rebuts.
Yeah, can you say anything bad about Ana de Armas? I dare you.
I think she's wet. I don't, you know, she's a good-looking girl, but she's wet. And in fact, one of the great problems of the Bond films is that there is this contrast between those female characters that are wet and those female characters that are not, and that goes right back to the observation made by the best writer on Fleming, on Bond, Umberto Eco in 1965. And he contrasted those women who were really, how should one put it, had edge, and those women who were too nice. And you're praising a nice girl. I mean, you know, obviously a slightly sassy one by modern standards, by 1965 standards, but a nice girl. And I'm saying it doesn't really work. You've got to have somebody who can carry a more interesting role. And if we are going to say, this is the second point, if we are going to say, oh, we have to be consistent here, this is supposed to be a drab film about a dry character who is depressed and things are going wrong well, let's not bother watching the film. That's no advert for watching the film. If you don't want to see Mission Impossible, well, you don't really want to see Mission Impossible anyway, but you don't want to see Mission Impossible to have Tom Cruise star as somebody who's broken his ankle and is going to have to sit out all the fights for this film. I mean, you know, it's a ludicrous proposition.
Those things don't happen. Bond fights throughout this entire film.
The fact is that many of the critics on the last Bond film pointed out it was disjointed, poorly structured, suffered from different script writers, and you could actually see bits welded together that don't make much sense. Now, I'm not arguing that Spectre is a great film. We've established that. I'm not saying it's a great film. I'm simply saying it's less bad than the other one. And I think that is indubitably what the view is of most people who've seen both of them.
And if we added all their opinions together, that and $3 will get you a cup of coffee. I don't care what all the critics in the world say because they can't back it up.
This is a court of
Now,
law.
I also don't think No Time to Die is great. I just think it's also less awful than Spectre because Spectre sets up great promise. Christoph Waltz is your bad guy, and you make him the stupidest character in your entire franchise. This dumb, petty little brother who builds a $1 trillion global syndicate to murder one dude, and you can't do it in 30 years, you pathetic group of losers. Ooh, big shadowy power organization. Now you want interesting? All right, let's tell you dry. How about the plot of Spectre, right? What's Spectre's evil plan? Big data? Oh no, not big data. They're gonna, survey me. It's so dry. It's so lame. He barely gets to fist fight anyone because there's no one to fight. At least the nanobot poison technology in No Time to Die is vibrantly interesting. It's bizarre. When he sprays down all of Spectre and all their faces start melting, that's cool. And that's a lot better than big data. So if you're going to complain about dry things, Spectre's ultimate plan of evil is boring. It's basically what Amazon is already doing. So it's super boring, and that's why I think the nanobots, which essentially we have to agree are a type of robot. Robots are cool, possibly the first robots in a Bond movie. And I do want to mention I really like I like Rami Malek. Safin is clearly just there as a tool to kill off Spectre again, because we hate Spectre from the movie Spectre. This is a fan service movie. We're going to kill all of Spectre because we know how bad we botched that last movie. And here's another guy. I like his poison motif. We have not seen a villain in Bond with like a poison motif. Exactly. And his sort of mutually assured destruction of Bond is just really petty. That's the kind of bad guy I like. Like, okay, you'll stop me, but that's it for you. Like, you're going down too. Like, everybody dies. I enjoy that kind of thing. And I did want to mention the theme songs are all great. And I just want to mention that Skyfall, Writing on the Wall from Spectre, and No Time to Die all won consecutive Golden Globes and Academy Awards for Best Original Song, which is unheard of, that 3 films in a franchise would do consecutive winning years like that. So
they are good.
I thought that was pretty.
The best one is Skyfall out of those.
Yes.
Three. I have to tell you, I don't think the Spectre one is particularly marvelous. I don't think the other ones, particularly the No Time to Die ones, but I think the Skyfall is the best of those songs. And on the Poison one, first of all, as I've said, it's not the first time Poison has appeared in a James Bond film.
But is there a guy whose whole thing is poison? Like, I know there's.
That's the point of a number of the films. It's the point of On Her Majesty's Secret Service. It's the point of Moonraker. It's actually, poisoning everything on Earth is the point of both of those two. So no, I wouldn't go that far. I mean, it's a lift out of the Poison Garden itself, as I've said, is a direct take on the last section of the novel. You Only Live Twice. There's nothing wrong. Sorry, can I just make clear? There's nothing necessarily wrong with a lack of originality, but there's no reason particularly to praise it. Let's just, I'm just trying to be level-headed here. And I don't think we've really dealt with this question that, of the plots, they're both pretty silly. In Spectre's case, it's not just, you're just going for effect here. It's not just an organization to kill Bond. It's an organization based on the Spectre in the novel Thunderball and also depicted in the film Thunderball, which is essentially a system to make a lot of money for criminal organizations organized as a collective. And that's why when you go to that meeting in Rome, they're starting off talking about how their various branches are making money, and they're actually trying to be up to date. They're talking at length. The woman is talking about people trafficking, and actually that links to the big data. The point is that the idea is that all of their activities are going to be easier because they're going to be able to understand what the intelligence services of all the world are doing. Now, as far as the organization of Spectre is concerned, Spectre, as depicted by Fleming, as depicted in Thunderbolt, is a federal organization. Blofeld is there as a kind of chairman, but the others, as it were, the groups that go towards it, the mafia and all the other national groups that are described as going towards it, are, as it were, sovereign bodies within that. And the point is, he is depicted as having this, obsession with Bond, which is stupid. I agree with you. It's totally stupid. Just as, quite frankly, all that stuff in No Time to Die is completely stupid. Who the hell cares about this neurotic love life? The whole point about Bond is that he doesn't suffer from neurosis. And in fact, what you're doing is you're defending a neurotic account of James Bond, which is only creeps in that last film. And
I would like to counter.
I mean, it's just rubbish. That is not the Bond that people expect. It's not the Bond of the earlier films, and it's not the Bond of the novels. I'm not particularly interested in a neurotic Bond. I mean, you can obviously make a case, if you like, to say that once you're going to have a neurotic, depressed, and uninteresting Bond who doesn't want sex, let's all make it consistent and make it a drab film. Personally, I'd rather not have a drab film. And in fact, it was quite interesting. I'll tell you an interesting thing. We're doing this. I'd seen it twice in the cinema. My wife said to me, well, are you going to see them both again? Because obviously we have to buy them. I said, okay, I'll buy Spectre. I said, I'm not going to see No Time again. It's the worst of all the films since the first Casino Royale. Why should I want to sit through that again for nearly 3 hours? It's a terrible film, but I'm being polite because I don't want to actually damn a film, but it is actually the weakest of the
damn the film. Damn it right to hell. But here's what I want to about it being drab. Bond is not neurotic throughout No Time to Die the entire time. He begins it because he's coming out of a slump. He's coming out of a challenge. But pretty much once Leiter recruits him and he heads back to Cuba, he's getting his groove back, as Stella would say. And it's all about him coming back and finding this passion to save the world, to stop a man like Safin, to protect people, and to take on responsibility. Bond is rediscovering that. Now, if you want to talk about which film here betrays more of Bond, James Bond dying in order to save a woman he loves, to save a nation, is to me way more James Bond than I'm going to call it all quits and go home with this woman and sit at home and get fat and watch TV. Like Spectre ends. Like, oh, I'm just going to retire and go home. Like, really? There's still clearly evil in the world, dude. You're just going to sit around while that happens? That's pretty irresponsible and un-Bond-like. But he only cares about him and his little girlfriend now. It's an unhappy ending. I don't like how Spectre ends. I don't want to see Bond just go home and sit with his wife now. That's a pathetic end to the ideal masculine that Bond is supposed to be. That he's just going to be a stay-at-home dad, stay-at-home husband now. It's pathetic. Him dying the virtuous, righteous way, he gets to leave. Clearly, Craig was unhappy with how Spectre ended, the way Bond was going to end. He wanted to leave on a different note. No, Bond can't exist in a suburb. There's no suburban Bond. He has to die, and he has to die heroically. And what's great is Safin doesn't kill him. They do this right. He does not kill him. The poison on Bond, the nanobots, will only kill Madeline and Matilda, the daughter. So Bond could literally... He could just go home and never see Madeline again. And as long as he never contacts her, they'll never touch her or kill her, and she'll be fine. Bond could live a free life. He will not live a life without them, and he decides to die instead. And so I think that's a great way of Bond kind of choosing to die. He's not killed by Safin, It's not an L, but Bond still dies in a heroic way. He's not sitting rotting in some retirement home, getting chubby with a station wagon. He went out, in all his glory.
With his boots on.
I'll rest on that, though.
Okay, cool. Both sides have rested their cases. Mr. Jeremy Black, you may present your closing argument.
Well, I think we've both heard everything that is to be said here. But what I would return to is that on the basis of film, as opposed to, as it were, a narrative of Bond's character. On the basis of film, I think Spectre is a better film. I think it's slightly tighter. I think it has a better color palette. I think it is more exciting, more adventurous, and has stronger female characters. There are obviously flaws in the plot. I entirely agree with my colleague on this, but on the criterion that I've offered, which is the least bad of the films, I think Spectre is generally agreed to be there as less bad than No Time to Die.
Mr. Maynard Bangs, please present your closing argument.
Thanks, number two. Hi, everyone. It's me, Ernst Stavro Blofeld, your leader. Hey, how's it going? Before we get into new business, I just wanted to sit down with you guys and have a little powwow about some of our recent performance metrics. 20 years ago, when I murdered my father and staged my own death, I started this organization with a simple dream: to kill my piece of shit fake brother, James Bond. And believe me, no one is prouder of the work this organization has done than me. We were number one in global terror again this year. Our relentless grip on the world market has never been tighter. But I was recently reviewing last quarter's brother killing numbers, and I have to just come right out and say it. They're way below projection. Now, you all know me. I don't like to throw the word failure around. Instead, I try to only see opportunity. But seriously, guys, we are a multi-trillion-dollar global crime syndicate with literally thousands of members hidden across the planet, operating at the highest levels of government. Can we really not kill one fucking annoying-ass bathroom hogging brother? I'm just saying. We toppled 2 regimes last week. We instigated that genocide, and that's all well and good. But I think we need to ask ourselves, how does this get us closer to killing my brother? And don't get me wrong, I love the crime. You guys know I'm all about the crime. The money is very good. But without the brother killing, I just feel like absolute control over the world's resources is a little hollow. So this is not a down note. It's not a setback. Nobody's getting fired. Okay, but I think we need to refocus this year on what this organization's values really are. Killing little orphan Annie over there, daddy's little angel. And remember, at the end of the day, it's all about fun. All right, so hands in on 3. Let's get out there and kill my brother. Woohoo!
Thank you, Mr. Maynard. Although I think you've forgotten that you're standing in a courtroom right now when you just blank out and do that sort of thing. But thank you all the same. Members of the jury, Mr. Dylan J. Schlender, Mr. Big Ben Haslar, and Mr. the author of all your pain, Brian Luis Rodriguez. You have all heard the facts concerning this case. It is now up to you to determine which film is the superior movie. The bailiff will escort you to the deliberation room to render your verdict. Right this way. I just want you to know I had a very clever joke about No Time to Die and Die Another Day, but Mr. Maynard stepped all over it, so I got nothing for you today. Anyway, doors
Naturally. All right, very good case, because I just got to say out the gate, I kind of agreed with everything they said about both movies. I think the movies have comparable strengths and comparable weaknesses. And I mean, they both agreed like the first part of Spectre was better, which I agree with, but the end of Spectre is atrocious. And then I actually really dug the end of No Time to Die. I don't mind the idea of Craig's Bond dying. I don't like the unceremonious kicking of the scientist into the acid vat after she spent so much time like maneuvering him around just to do that. It's like, I was kind of hoping he'd have a funnier death, but okay, whatever. I mean, it was, what time it is, time to die, and No Time to Die. So it's like, well, I guess it's kind of there. But I agree with Maynard. I love that point about how so both movies kind of have this throwback element to them where they're making a lot of callbacks. And I do like that. I think that scientist, he was kind of the secret sauce. Jeremy was saying there was no bite, and maybe there was no bite, but I thought that
he's not
scientist.
That
scientist,
he's
no,
not
he's
bite.
not the bite. No, that's the thing. It's not a bite, but it is just that little bit of like a lemon twist kind of thing in the drink that I thought made the movie interesting. Because if you take him out and you watch these movies back to back, which I did, it's very banal, going all the way through Spectre, all the way through No Time to Die. But this hilarious Russian scientist shows up, and I'm like, I'm here for this guy. Ryan, what are you thinking?
I am torn between these movies because it's for me, it's a gentleman's 5 versus a gentleman's 6.
Okay.
I think No Time to Die has the edge slightly simply because when I saw this in the theater, I was genuinely shocked that they killed him. I knew it was Craig's last movie, but I figured it would be a riding into the sunset, like at the end of Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, where it's like there are further adventures to be had, but you don't get to see them. And then, of course, they made 2 more movies that weren't very good. But like with No Time to Die, I look at it versus Spectre, and I'm really attached to the cinematography, which is Roger Deakins versus Shrug. Who the hell shot No Time to Die? Who cares? But Roger Deakins on your side is great. And of course, Ana de Armas, best thing in No Time to Die, hands down, steals the entire movie despite being in it for like 15 minutes.
Oh, even less than that, I think. Where did she go? Where does she go? She just leaves.
My parents went to go see this in the theaters after I had, and my mom walked out and said, "So, Ana de Armas, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah, exactly."
I get it, son.
And it is to this point of not the Bond that people expect. I like that. I like the fact that it's not the Bond that has been built up for 40 years. I like the fact that he has a serialized adventure. I understand that that is anathema to what most people think about that character, but I like the fact that it wasn't reinventing the wheel, but it was trying something different, and I always appreciate the swing.
Well, I like what they're going for, like in concept, but I don't know that it's kind of going against everything, and it's not complex enough that they think they are. Like, these aren't 3-hour-long stories that they're telling. The plots are, if they're like echoing back to the previous James Bond, they're not making it complicated or deep enough to sort of justify that length of time that they're sitting you there for. Because like, I don't think they really explain like why these villains plans are, how it would make sense in like this serious world of James Bond's pain, like that. These two themes rarely go together in my mind. So yeah, I agree with Mr. Black, and I guess pretty much everyone, that these are the worst of that. I do like No Time to Die as a 7 and Spectre as a gentleman's 6. But these aren't. Skyfall was the height for me. After this, it's like, why are we still going? And I actually knew Craig was going to die, and I was kind of disappointed in the way where it's like, well, if I can't be with this one woman, I may as well die. Like, it seems like, that's a kind of a defeatist attitude for Bond to have. He could get out in that speedboat and they could wait for Q to figure something out in 10 years or whatever. No.
I mean, that's the thing. Q would figure that out in like in a week. I did. Yeah. Go ahead.
The overwhelming bummer. The bummer is that by killing Daniel Craig, you're essentially telling the supporting cast, "Oh, we don't need you next week. You can go home. We're good. Sorry. I know you have a new M and all that stuff, but yeah, we're good. We'll think of something else."
Well, I mean, they could, if the Bond in the future, they could still use some of those guys, I suppose. All right. So do we want to start locking in, see how we're feeling? All right. Ryan, do you want to start, or should I make
I am going No Time to Die.
No Time to Die. All right.
As being
Big Ben.
I think I kind of agreed with the arguments more for Spectre, more because he was like leaning towards them both being not as good as people think they are, and I agree with that. I think Spectre was the strongest argument.
Oh, you're gonna make me decide.
I'm gonna make you choose.
All right, man. This is a tough one for me, just because both arguments were very good and to the point, and I just got to give I got to agree with Ben, and I'm going with the argumentation. I just think Jeremy had the better of it for Spectre. I think Sam Menendez was just a stronger director. I was going to say too, I think like a lot of directors, they start with like music videos. Like Sam Menendez must have started with like perfume commercials. So many shots of like you could just put like Calvin Klein over it or something,
Sam Menendez is Sam Mendes' Mexican brother.
It's Mendes, not Menendez.
Mendes, not Menendez.
Oh man,
very different.
Very different. Okay, well, it was. I have a cold and I'm very tired. Let's just go out there and tell that very handsome judge.
Excuses.
No.
Mr. Foreman, have you reached a verdict?
We have, Your Honor. In the case of the people versus... no, I'm sorry. Let me take that again. Yes, we have, Your Honor.
It's okay. You have a cold.
In the case... thank you. In the case of Spectre versus No Time to Die, we find in favor of Spectre being the superior.
The verdict is so rendered. Spectre is to be considered the superior Bond film, and we'll all sit tight and wait for the next Bond film when he comes out after missing in a volcano or whatever it was they did in the books. Court is adjourned.
This is Grumbly Grumblerson, the angriest reporter of the Gabagool Gazette, reporting to you live from outside the Reels of Justice. I won't lie, I just woke up. Thanks, guys, for the relaxing nap as you talked about James Bond or whatever. Jeremy Black, you were on one side, I guess. Who cares? How are you feeling about the jury's verdict?
Well, I agreed with the jury's verdict, but I also would like to thank them and to thank my colleague for sitting through such a lot of James Bond film, which is not of the standard of classics which we have discussed, such as Goldfinger or Diamonds Are Forever. And what I'd like to think about more is to say to film listeners, how do you think this kind of franchise should change so that it works for the late 2020s, but also has a degree of energy and, as it were, a degree of cohesion that some of the recent films have been missing?
Rob Maynard, I think you were representing Never Say Never Again. Let's hear your thoughts.
I probably would have won then. I wanted to do this because I wanted to deep dive both of these movies, so I knew how my feelings about them were. I agree with Jeremy, although my argument also was that both movies were crappy, and that mine was just a little less crappy. So that also was my argument. And I had much funnier openings and closings. But the thing is, Spectre starts so strong. Act 2 and 3 are garbage. Problem is, No Time to Die never gets off the ground. But the jury did confirm, and this proved Jeremy wrong. No, Ana de Armas is really hot. Sorry, Jeremy.
Yeah,
we love
is.
her. Maybe it's a generational thing, but we love her. Absolutely.
Well, I think it's an interesting thing. She's presumably younger than all you are.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not a judgmental man.
All right, I'm going back to sleep. Let's go back to the court or something. Grumblerson out.
But yeah, is Anna? She might be younger than us.
I think she was born in '88.
She definitely is.
I think she was born in '88. I mean, so Ben would be.
So
really
I'm 2 years older than her.
Yeah. So Maynard,
4 years. That's ballpark enough, man. You just didn't help. I have a chance here.
Yeah. Can I hear you, Jeremy? Yeah.
But can I just make a general point on actresses' ages? And first of all, I'd start off by saying a piece of advice I was given when I just started work. So I started a full-time job. I'd obviously had jobs before in 1980. And the head of the department, who then was, more than twice my age and seemed a sort of figure of sort of Lincoln-like wisdom, said to me, do you know, Jeremy? And he was always looked very smart. He said, I've learnt one thing as I get older. And I thought, what was this great piece of advice I was going to be given? And he said, the thing I've learned as I get older is I find more women attractive. And the point, in other words, is you've got to find a way of suggesting that women in their 40s, 50s, 60s, maybe older, are attractive. Now,
I want to say Monica Bellucci is in Spectre, and she's really hot. She is the widow. She's 50. She was the oldest cast, but she's really hot.
I didn't think it worked so well in the other film. Now, it may be that just Craig was too old for the last film. But you see an interesting example of that in the latest Napoleon. They cast a very good actress, in my view. You may disagree, but Vanessa Kirby as Josephine. I think she's very good. And she actually develops in the role, whilst Joaquin Phoenix doesn't. But the thing they get wrong is she, as an actress...
How did you say his first name for me one more time, Jeremy?
Whatever.
Did you say Joaquin?
Whatever.
Very impressive.
She, as an actress, is younger than he as an actor. But of course, in real life, Josephine was older than him. And that is also significant in the plot terms, because if you've seen the film Napoleon, they make a lot of the fact that she can't have children by him, whereas she can have children by her first husband. And they completely blow that by not having an older an older actress. And I do wonder why they can't have a situation. Why is it that the Bond actresses still have to be people who are, you know, pantomime youngsters? Because we've had in the past mature women who've actually been able to convey some sexuality. You know, the woman that played Fatima Blush, the woman that played Xenia Onatop. They actually came across as, you know, as really, as it were, fully rounded sexually.
Very
in
rounded.
every sense of the word. Yeah, very rounded. And whereas I have to tell you, the lady that you were praising,
Ana
I
de
don't
Armas.
mean to be rude, but she's a bit like a boy, isn't she? And I don't, you know, I find it rather disturbing that that's the idea of the acme of female sexuality at the moment. Anyway, on to another note. You like to talk.
It is an interesting point. I do want to say, Ana de Armas, when she's 50 years old, I'm still going to go see your movies. But Jeremy, what's your recommendation? What have you seen for us lately?
Well, I've seen several films. I've seen a new British one that's come out called Saltburn, which is rather good. It's a Gothic film. And
you like the bathtub stuff.
Yes. I saw also an American film that came out last year, which I think would make very interesting comparison for one of your programs, and that was Marlowe, with Liam Neeson as Marlowe, and Jessica Lange is in it. And it's not one of Chandler's stories, but it's based on, you know, the Chandler character. And I would have thought, if you're looking at an idea for a comparison, it would be to compare that with one of the classic, you know, original Marlowe ones with Humphrey Bogart.
I love that idea.
Yeah.
I'm also going to be recommending a Liam Neeson movie, so this is fantastic.
But no,
well, yeah, I told you.
That's a good one. We should we will add that to the list, because I do like, you know, doing any kind of more detective stuff, and and old
especially
versus new,
and the noir kind of thing.
Yeah, and Chandler would be.
And we already did the was it The Long Kiss Goodnight? Was it with Matthew Elliott? What was that one?
The Marlowe one.
It was
The Long Goodbye.
The Big Sleep.
The Long Goodbye.
The Long Goodbye.
Oh, no, it is The Big Sleep.
The Big Sleep. It was the
Of
remake
course.
of The Big Sleep. That's what it was.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it actually seems to go back to some of the originals, because
yes, I would want to do that.
I think the originals are interesting because the way in which they capture what to the audience was the here and now. They weren't intended as retrospectives. Though I'll tell you, when I first went to California, which was in 1988, you know, all I knew about California was watching Humphrey Bogart, and I just thought there's something very strange here, and it took me a couple of days to work out what it was, and that is that in Humphrey Bogart there's no air conditioning, and everybody looks hot and bothered and all the rest of it, whereas in August 1988, even though it was over 100, there was aircon all over the place, and it just was totally different.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, sorry.
And it wasn't tobacco in their cigarettes when you were there either, Jim. Now, as luck would have it, I wasn't able to see my favorite movie of 2023 until it was 2024. Even though New Year's was a really long time ago, Ryan, so it's weird you're still talking about it. But
yeah, happy Valentine's, by the way.
My recommendation is 2023's The Iron Claw. Based on the true life story of the Von Erich family, this film follows four Texas brothers as they struggle to rise to prominence in the world of 1980s professional wrestling in order to gain the approval of their ruthlessly ambitious father. In honor of my wonky yet affable co-host Ryan Luis Rodriguez, I actually schlepped out to the theater to see this one. And not just the local theater either. I went to the big fancy one with the reclining chairs and shit.
Nice.
I'm glad I was the only one in the theater that day, so nobody could see me cry. I was already pretty familiar with the tragedies that befell the Von Erich family, having seen multiple documentaries on the topic. The Triumph and Tragedy of WCCW was a great one, as well as the excellent Dark Side of the Ring episode that Vice put out. And even if you are too, I urge you to bring some tissues to this one. But huge kudos to the entire cast. They actually filmed the wrestling scenes by having full wrestling shows in front of a live crowd in a converted furniture store. I hope to God someone filmed those matches in their entirety, because I would buy a DVD with that special feature. Make it happen, A24. And a special big props to Zac Efron for the shape he got himself in. He's even bigger than Kevin was back at his prime. And for any fans of pro wrestling, you have to see this one. It's easily the best wrestling film of all time. The way it brings to life the world of 80s professional wrestling. Very important distinction there, because this is, in essence, a snapshot of a time in an industry that is now long gone, very changed. And it's fascinating to see the time when it was a bit more off script and unpredictable. The Iron Claw is definitely not in theaters anymore because New Year's was a really long time ago, Ryan. But it's A24, so it's got to be available to stream by now, seeing as it's a date way past New Year's, Ryan.
Oh, it's got to be. I'm going to stream it tonight on something.
Big Ben, what do you got?
I'm also weirdly wrapping up my 2023 picks in February or whenever it is now. It's technically not a movie, but it's letterboxed. It counts it. So I'm going to do it as well, since the same team probably created it from beginning to end. It's the wildly historically inaccurate, of course, but still so stylish and fun, Blue Eye Samurai, which is an animated action adult series that focuses on Mizu, a female Ronin whose mixed race heritage cursed her with the titular blue eyes, making her feel not truly Japanese, as if half of her blood were cursed in some way. A feeling that is accentuated by the fact, and I put that in air quotes because it is inaccurate, that 4 foreigners are living in secret in Japan, massing armies to take over the country. Definitely xenophobic, and again, doesn't completely capture the complex nature the Japanese have had with foreigners over the years, but it does make for interesting storytelling. The animation is slick and beautiful, the characters are rounded out and fun, and there's lots of nods to Japanese cinema and literature along the way.
Now, historically accurate compared to Last Samurai?
It's on par with that inaccuracy, I would say. Yeah.
Ooh, you remind me, keep an open. I have a question for Jeremy at the end, but let's hop over to Schlenzo for his Liam Neeson.
Oh, yeah, of course. Actually, first, I just want to take a moment. Jeremy's always so modest when he comes on. He doesn't plug his numerous books, but I'm actually reading his newest one, A Brief History of History. And while brief is not lacking in details, I can't believe, Jeremy, how much information you pack into like one paragraph. Like, the book is exceptional, learning a lot. I finished it months ago, actually. So
yes,
yes, quite.
I really appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so definitely one everyone should be picking up. It just to really sell it. Jeremy references Sabaton, the heavy metal band, talking about their influence and how people understand history. Fantastic.
Well, you could confirm this for me, Schlenzo. Jeremy's his book with all the maps of battles is always on my coffee table.
Absolutely, the battle map. Yeah, no, Jeremy's got tons of great books. I just don't want our audience to lose sight of that. Go through and pick up a couple. You will not regret it. But for my movie recommendation, which is an important part of the show, my exploration of Liam Neeson being the Bronson heir apparent, I've discovered a few more gems. And one of them is 2021. So this is kind of new, The Marksman. So do you want to see Liam Neeson fight the cartel? Yeah. Do you want like a cheesy cash-in that's ripping off this trend of old man and young child that we saw in The Mandalorian and The Last of Us and all that? Well,
what's that called, Ben? The Wolf and Pup?
Yeah, Wolf and Cub.
Yeah, so I don't know why that's made such a big comeback, especially like in this, like for these fatherly, avuncular figures, then to be capable of crazy violence. But you know what? I like the formula. So this one's for you. Basically what happens is Liam Neeson is a rancher who lives on the border. He stumbles across an illegal immigrant and her son who are trying to cross the border with tons of the cartel's money. What does Liam Neeson do? Well, he takes the money, he takes the son, and he brings them straight to Chicago, even though it kind of goes against his instincts of turning them in because, it's a movie. And they call him the Marksman, obviously, because he's a great shot. Action ensues. It's exactly the kind of movie you'd expect. This one I could see more than any other of these Neeson hackers that I'm recommending. I could really see Bronson in this role, although he'd probably bring a lot more racism to it. So maybe it's good Charlie Bronson's dead instead of doing movies like this anymore.
Okay,
I don't know.
All right.
So anyway, it's streaming on Tubi. Check it out.
Really went downhill there. I got to remind myself not to just let you think as you talk. Ryan, send us on home.
For my recommendation this week, I'm actually on topic.
What?
It's a spy thriller from Brad Bird, co-starring the lovely Léa Seydoux, 2011's Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol. It just so happens to be my second favorite installment of one of my favorite action franchises, and it doesn't matter what it's about. If you show up to watch Tom Cruise climb tall buildings, the Burj Khalifa in Dubai, you will get your money's worth. As someone with extreme acrophobia, it might be one of the most triggering set pieces ever committed to celluloid, and it stands as part of a 40-minute stretch of action that stands as perhaps one of the greatest middle thirds in all of cinema, much less the action genre. Gentleman's Nine, no question. Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol is currently streaming on Paramount Plus and Netflix. Yuck.
Is this the one where he beats up Philip Seymour Hoffman with his elbows?
That's the third one.
Oh, okay. Never mind that.
I
don't think
almost
it's Ghost
recommended that
Protocol.
one, Ryan. That was close.
I should see that.
I had no interest in seeing that movie, but then you told me Lea Seydoux is in it, and I'm like,
And
oh.
Brad Bird directing. I love Brad Bird, man. When is he gonna do the Johnny Quest movie? That's what people want to know.
Now, I had a question for Jeremy. Now, Jeremy, we all saw Godzilla -1 recently, which I think you should see because it does some really interesting historical counterfactual stuff, right? Schlender tells me that's the buzzword. I don't know what any of it
That is
means.
the right term. No, you're right.
But Jeremy, I wanted to ask you the thing that Schlender and I have been debating. What do you think would happen or would have happened if Japan surrendered with Germany?
Would have happened in what sense? They wouldn't have used the atom bomb.
Right. Wouldn't have had the chance to.
No, they wouldn't have had the chance to. It wouldn't have been operative yet. I'm not sure whether Japan would have accepted what the Allies wanted, which was unconditional surrender. On the other hand, it's up to the Americans, essentially, because at that stage, the Soviet Union wasn't at war with Japan. And whilst the British were fighting the Japanese in Burma and the Australians in New Guinea, it was preponderantly an American and Chinese war, and only with Japan, and only the Americans were in a shape to really deliver force against Japan. So if Japan had actually said, well, we'd like to go back to the status quo antebellum, the situation before the war, it might, and if they did announce that publicly, it might have been very difficult for the Americans not to accept it.
Yeah, because to me, what is interesting is that, to me, the whole course of the Cold War is triggered by the use of the atom bomb. No one can afford outright war anymore, because we've demonstrated that, this is really serious. So, I was always just wondering, how the Cold, would we have just gotten into open war with the, and got with the commies and
here's the thing: would the communists make a play on Japan if Japan surrendered unconditionally and there wasn't an American occupation?
That was one of the fears for using the atomic bomb. That's why they did it, right? They didn't want Russia to gain Japan as a sphere of influence.
Absolutely.
And Jeremy, if a giant monster attacked Japan,
I think I just say it's a bit more complicated than that. I mean, as you know, there is a tradition of, as it were, a hostile tradition arguing that the use of the atom bomb was primarily to do with what came afterwards. I actually think it was primarily to do with how on earth you managed to defeat Japan short of a very large number of casualties. And I think they'd been quite shocked by the casualty rates on Iwo Jima and Okinawa. And the idea that that might be extrapolated was one that I think was foremost in their mind. As far as, the difficulty is that the Japanese government that under General Tojo had actually resigned in July 1944 after the loss of Saipan. And that in the case of Japan, there was a sort of drift. They knew they were losing, but nobody seems to have had the drive or power to say, we've lost, now we need to surrender or to negotiate terms. And of course, looked at differently, the Allies, in the case of Germany, had enunciated unconditional surrender as their goal because they they believed that that was the only way to hold the alliance together during the war and to prevent separate negotiations with Hitler. And that was probably a correct analysis. And the question was, if you were not going to have unconditional surrender for Japan, how on earth are you going to sell that to American public opinion? Because American public opinion, understandably so, I'm not criticizing them, had a view that, you know, the Japanese had started the Pacific War, and that as it were, that capability had to be removed. In other words, Japan had forcibly to be demilitarized. And I can't quite see how they were going to do that any other way. So I think everybody was in a mess. Which often happens in wartime. You know, I wouldn't myself push the conspiracy theory to the fore. I'm a great believer in cock-up in history rather than conspiracy.
Wait, which conspiracy are you mentioning?
Oh, to deter the Soviets.
To deter the Soviets, yes.
Yeah. That is the conspiracy theory that I prescribe to. Absolutely. Not just the Soviets, the whole world. Like that's what I view it as all right, playtime's over. You know, here's the end of conventional war, guys. It's done.
Can I just say, but it wasn't. I mean, the largest war in the world since 1945 took place when America had a nuclear monopoly, and the American client state lost, which was what? Come on.
Vietnam.
No, come on.
No.
Korea?
No. Largest in terms of number of soldiers fighting. No, it's Chinese Civil War.
Gotcha.
The Americans had
a movie about it.
The Americans had a nuclear monopoly, and the American side, the nationalists, didn't win. The Soviet side, you know, actively armed, and you know, the communists won. And so, in other words, having the atom bomb wasn't necessarily going to produce success. Indeed, you could look at Europe, you could argue the exact opposite. There is an argument. I mean, I personally think the argument is stupid, but there is an argument that Stalin was even more committed to seizing territory precisely because of his anxiety that America had the atom bomb. In other words, far from the atom bomb controlling the Soviets,
it instigated them.
Yeah, well, for example, you know, I mean, it's worth pointing out, you know, like the coup in Czechoslovakia in 1948, which is, again, a time when the Americans had the monopoly of nuclear power, but there was a nuclear armament, but there was no way they were going to use it. And I think, I mean, how should one say? I mean, I think it's an image of that, and it's brilliantly used in this recent film on Oppenheimer. It's an image, but not necessarily something in which stopped history.
Okay.
That's my own view.
Fly back over here to America, and we'll have some more beer and talk about this for a while. Okay. Well, and see Godzilla -1, because it takes place right after World War II. They retcon some of history.
Right after there was a nuclear lizard, you know, that's a retcon.
Yes, but also that the U.S.
Very historically
government, the U.S. provincial government that's set up in Japan afterwards essentially withdraws when Godzilla is introduced in this film. Whereas I think we confirmed, we're like, oh no, MacArthur would blow that thing to hell. He would fucking fight Godzilla. If it sunk an American ship, they'd kill the hell out of that thing.
Or if the Americans really did pull out, I do think the Soviet Union would try to make a play to get in.
Anyway, Jeremy, you see
I love this movie.
I want to talk about it and how screwed up it is in its history. But
I'm going to have a look at it. I'm delighted. I mean, I tell you what, I didn't mention them. I tell you, I have been to America because I went to Louisiana recently to lecture.
That's
right. And on the way over, I saw the latest Mission Impossible, which I was disappointed by, quite frankly. I saw Godfather 3. I'd seen it before, but again, I saw it again. It still works. It's overlong, and one knows what's going to happen in the opera house, but it's still very good. And I saw Babylon, and I thought what I found was really interesting in Babylon was the contrast between the two parties, the enormous party in the beginning and that macabre party in the caves. Later
the Boogie
on.
Nights party.
Sorry?
The Boogie Nights party. That's what it was ripping off.
Yeah, I thought it was a very interesting film. I don't know whether you've seen it. I liked that film.
I got to see that, and I got to see Saltburn too. I've got to see all those excessive party movies. But we'll have to save the party for next time because we are all out of show. But we want to thank our guest, Jeremy Black, for joining us. Thank you so much, Jeremy.
Pleasure. When are we going to do the other one?
We'll talk about that in a second, but and we hope everyone else will join us again as well next time as the Reels of Justice keep turning.
Count it.
No, time to die.
It's the joke.
That is the joke.
Please follow us on Twitter at Reels of Justice, Instagram Reels of Justice, and Facebook.com/Reels of Justice.